The weight of boxes in my arms couldn't compare to the heaviness in my chest as I crossed the threshold of our new home. Tom's voice echoed from somewhere upstairs, directing the movers with the confidence that had first drawn me to him 3 years ago. But now, that same self-assurance carried an undertone that made me pause, like the faint smell of decay beneath fresh paint. "Paulina, honey, the kitchen boxes go in here," Tom called out, his footsteps thundering down the curved staircase of our Victorian-style house. The late afternoon sun caught his wedding ring as he gestured, sending prisms dancing across the freshly painted walls. I forced a smile, trying to ignore the whispers of doubt that had been growing since we'd first visited this neighborhood. Our new beginning, that's what Tom had called it. A promotion that seemed too good to be true, regional director of operations at Morrison Financial, complete with a salary that had made my eyes widen when I saw the offer letter. But something about the speed of it all, the rushed house purchase, the insistence on moving immediately, stirred an unease in my gut that I couldn't quite name. The neighbor across the street, Mrs. Henderson, had been watching our moving process all afternoon from behind her lace curtains. When Tom left to direct the moving truck into the driveway, she emerged from her house like a ghost materializing through fog, her gray hair perfectly set despite the humid August air. "You must be Tom's wife," she said, her voice carrying a tremor that seemed out of place with her well-put-together appearance. I knew the previous owners well. Such a shame about their sudden departure. Her eyes darted to the upstairs windows, then back to mine with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "Yes, we were fortunate the house was available on such short notice," I replied, trying to maintain the excitement expected of a new homeowner. But Mrs. Henderson's hand shot out, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. "Listen carefully, dear," she whispered, her perfectly manicured nails pressing into my skin. "Things aren't always what they seem in this neighborhood. Your husband She stopped abruptly as Tom's footsteps approached, releasing my wrist and stepping back with a practiced smile. That night, after the movers left and Tom fell into exhausted sleep beside me, I stood at our bedroom window, watching the streetlights cast long shadows across our new lawn. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother, Michael. "Got here safe? Something feels off about this whole situation, Paul, call me tomorrow." I deleted the message, but Michael's words echoed Mrs. Henderson's warning, mixing with my own growing unease. The promotion, the house, the way Tom's new colleagues had looked at me during the office welcome party, like they knew something I didn't. Their wives had been even worse, exchanging glances over their wine glasses when they thought I wasn't looking. A car drove past slowly, its headlights sweeping across our front yard. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of Mrs. Henderson still awake in her house across the street, her silhouette frozen at her own window. As our eyes met through the darkness, she raised her hand in what might have been a wave or a warning. The next morning, I found a note slipped under our front door. The handwriting was shaky but deliberate. "The last woman who lived in your house asked too many questions. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. Be careful who you trust." The paper crumpled in my trembling hands as Tom's footsteps descended the stairs. "Everything okay, honey?" he asked, adjusting his tie in the hallway mirror. The morning light caught his face at an angle that made him look almost like a stranger. "Just another welcome note from the neighbors," I lied, slipping the paper into my pocket. Tom's reflection smiled, but his eyes remained cold, calculating. For the first time since we'd met, I wondered if I really knew the man I'd married. As he left for work, I watched him drive away in his new company car, the Morrison Financial logo gleaming on the side. The same car I'd seen 3 times last night, driving past our house well after midnight. My fingers traced the edges of the note in my pocket as Mrs. Henderson's curtains twitched across the street, and I realized with growing certainty that our new beginning might actually be the end of everything I thought I knew. The truth has a way of revealing itself in fragments, like shards of a broken mirror that cut as you try to piece them together. 3 weeks after moving into our new house, I stood in Tom's home office, my fingers hovering over a locked drawer that shouldn't have captured my attention, but the flash of papers I'd glimpsed when he'd opened it earlier had stirred something in my subconsciousness, a pattern my mind refused to ignore. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic. Tom was at another late meeting, his third this week. Each time he returned home later, his kisses tasted of mint, too fresh, too deliberate, as if hiding something beneath. The drawer key had taken me 2 days to find, hidden inside a hollow book in our bedroom. My hands trembled as I inserted it, each turn of the mechanism echoing like gunshots in the quiet house. Inside, beneath a layer of ordinary paperwork, lay a manila envelope thick with documents. My breath caught as I spread the contents across his mahogany desk. Driver's licenses with Tom's photo but different names. Bank statements for accounts I'd never known existed. A passport with yet another alias. Each document told a story of a man I didn't know, a shadow living beneath the surface of my husband's skin. A car door slammed outside, and I froze. Through the office window, I watched Mrs. Henderson hurrying across her lawn toward our house. The doorbell rang moments later, its chime sending my heart into my throat. I quickly returned the documents to their hiding place, my mind racing with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Mrs. Henderson's face was drawn with worry when I opened the door. "I saw him leaving the office today," she said without preamble, pushing past me into the foyer. "He was with Marcus Sullivan." The name meant nothing to me, but the fear in her eyes made my blood run cold. "The last family," she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, "they weren't just house flippers like everyone said. Sarah, the wife, she found something in her husband's papers. Something about Morrison Financial. 3 days later, they disappeared. The police said they moved to Arizona, but Sarah's sister lives in my garden club. No one's heard from them since." My mind flashed to the documents upstairs, to Tom's increasingly frequent late nights and whispered phone calls. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, but I already knew the answer. The walls of my perfectly constructed life were crumbling, revealing the rot beneath. "Because I saw how they looked at you at the neighborhood barbecue last weekend," she replied, her fingers twisting her pearl necklace. "The same way they looked at Sarah before." She glanced over her shoulder, then pressed a business card into my palm. "This man helped my nephew when he got mixed up in something similar. Don't call from your regular phone. Don't tell anyone I gave you this." After she left, I stood in the entrance hall, the card burning in my hand like a live coal. The name printed in simple black text, James Morgan, private investigator, seemed to pulse with possibilities both liberating and terrifying. The sound of Tom's car pulling into the driveway sent me rushing upstairs. I barely had time to slip the card into my jewelry box before he entered, calling my name with the same warmth he'd always used. But now I heard the undertone of calculation in his voice, the careful manipulation that had always been there, hidden beneath layers of charm. "Rough day at the office?" I asked as he loosened his tie, watching his reflection in our bedroom mirror. The man I saw there was both familiar and foreign, like a photograph that's been subtly altered. "Just the usual corporate politics," he replied smoothly, but his eyes met mine in the mirror for a fraction too long, searching for something. "Morrison's expanding rapidly. Lots of internal restructuring." I thought of the multiple identities hidden in his office, of Mrs. Henderson's warning, of the family that had vanished without a trace. "Sounds stressful," I said, maintaining the facade of the supportive wife while my mind raced through scenarios and escape routes. "Maybe you could tell me more about it over dinner." He smiled, that same confident smile that had once made me feel safe but now sent chills down my spine. "Actually, I need to make a few calls first. Business never sleeps, right?" As he headed to his office, I heard the distinct sound of the drawer lock engaging. In the growing darkness of our bedroom, I caught my own reflection, a woman on the edge of a precipice, knowing that the next step would change everything. The question wasn't whether to jump, but how to survive the fall. Fear becomes a strange companion when it lives with you long enough. It settles into your bones, transforms into a sixth sense that heightens every shadow, every subtle shift in the air. As I sat in my parked car outside Morrison Financial, watching Tom emerge from the gleaming glass building, I realized I'd been living with this fear since the day we moved. I just hadn't known its name until now. My brother Michael sat beside me, his presence both comforting and confrontational. We'd spent the last hour reviewing everything I'd discovered, the multiple identities, the late-night meetings, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. Each piece of evidence felt like another nail in the coffin of my marriage. "He's not who you thought he was, Cole," Michael said softly, his eyes tracking Tom as he walked to his car with another executive, Marcus Sullivan, I presumed, the man Mrs. Henderson had warned me about. "The question is, who are you going to be now that you know?" The weight of his words settled into my chest like lead. Who was I? The naive wife, desperately clinging to the fiction of her perfect life? Or something else, something stronger, emerging from the ashes of this betrayal? I'd called James Morgan, the private investigator, 3 days ago from a burner phone purchased with cash. His voice had been grave as I recounted my discoveries. "Morrison Financial has been on our radar," he'd said. "But we've never been able to get close enough. Your husband's position, it could be the key we've been looking for." Now, watching Tom's calculated movements across the parking lot, I understood the terrible symmetry of our situation. He'd chosen me for my trustworthiness, my loyalty, the very qualities that would make my betrayal of him so devastating. "I need you to understand what you're getting into," Michael pressed, his hand covering mine on the steering wheel. "If what Morgan said is true, if Morrison Financial is really involved in large-scale fraud, these people won't hesitate to dash." "To what?" I cut him off, my voice sharp with an edge I barely recognized. "To hurt me. They're already doing that. Every lie Tom tells, every fake smile, every moment I have to pretend I don't know, it's all violence, just wrapped in designer suits and corporate logos." The sun was setting behind the Morrison Financial building, turning its windows into sheets of blood-red glass. In that crimson light, I watched Tom shake hands with Marcus Sullivan, their shadows stretching long and dark across the pavement. There was something predatory in their posture, a shared understanding that made my skin crawl. My phone buzzed, another text from Tom, "Working late again, honey. Don't wait up." The casual cruelty of it, the ease with which he maintained this facade, made something snap inside me. I'd spent weeks gathering evidence, documenting everything, building a case that could bring down not just Tom, but the entire operation he was part of. "You remember that summer when Dad left?" I asked Michael suddenly, my eyes still fixed on the building where my husband was probably destroying more lives with a signature and a smile. "How Mom just shut down. Became this ghost in our own house." Michael's grip on my hand tightened. We both remembered too well, the hollow eyes, the mechanical movements, the way she diminished herself to fit the shape of her pain. "I promised myself I'd never be that woman," I continued, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "I thought I was keeping that promise by being the perfect wife, by not questioning, by trusting. But maybe the real promise was about being strong enough to face the truth, no matter how ugly it is." As if on cue, my burner phone vibrated. James Morgan's message was brief, "Found the connection. Meeting tomorrow, 2 p.m. Bring everything you have." The dying sunlight caught my wedding ring, and for a moment, the diamond looked like a shard of ice, beautiful, cold, and capable of cutting deep. I twisted it off my finger, watching it catch the light one last time before dropping it into my pocket. "I need you to do something for me," I told Michael, starting the car as Tom's figure disappeared back into the building. "I need you to help me disappear, just for a while. But first, we're going to make copies of everything I found. Multiple copies, hidden in different places." "Insurance?" he asked, understanding darkening his features. "Protection," I corrected, pulling out of the parking lot. "Because tomorrow, I'm not just gathering evidence anymore. I'm going to war." The city lights began to flicker on around us as we drove, each one a star in a constellation of truth I was only beginning to map. In the passenger seat, Michael made calls, setting our plan in motion. And in my pocket, my wedding ring grew heavier with each passing moment, transforming from a symbol of love into a weight I would soon shed, like a snake slipping free of its old skin. The truth, when it finally emerged in its entirety, didn't break over me like a wave, it seeped in like poison, corrupting every memory, every tender moment, every promise Tom had ever made. James Morgan's office felt too small to contain the magnitude of what he was revealing, each word another shard of glass in my already bleeding heart. Morrison Financial isn't just committing fraud, Morgan explained, spreading photographs across his desk like a tarot reader revealing an apocalyptic future. They're systematically destroying lives. Your husband's department specializes in identifying vulnerable companies, orchestrating their collapse, and profiting from their destruction. The faces in the photographs stared back at me, broken men and women who had lost everything. Their eyes held the same haunted look I'd seen in Sarah's sister at the garden club, the same shadow that now lived in my own reflection. Among them, I recognized names from Tom's hidden documents, each one a testament to his calculated cruelty. But why? The question escaped me before I could stop it, though I already knew the answer. It lived in the memory of Tom's smile when he got the promotion, in the cold precision with which he organized his lies, in the way he'd chosen me, someone whose trust, once given, would be absolute. Power, Morgan said simply. Money. The thrill of playing God with other people's lives. Your husband's particular talent is in making it all appear legitimate. The multiple identities, the shell companies, they're all part of a larger scheme. My phone buzzed on the desk, Tom's number. The screen displayed his message with brutal simplicity, need to talk about dinner with the Sullivans tonight. Important business opportunity. The laugh that escaped me held no humor, only the sharp edge of revelation. Every dinner, every social engagement, every seemingly innocent introduction, they had all been calculated steps in selecting the next victim. How many times had I sat across from someone, making pleasant conversation, unaware that I was watching Tom mark them for destruction? They know you're investigating, Morgan continued, his voice dropping lower. Marcus Sullivan has been making inquiries about you. Your background, your family, particularly your brother Michael. The mention of Michael's name sent ice through my veins. Yesterday's conversation in the car took on new meaning. He wasn't just my confidant now, he was a potential target. The weight of this realization pressed against my chest like a stone. How much time do we have? Morgan's expression hardened. Days, maybe less. Sullivan's personal assistant reached out to me this morning, she's been gathering evidence of her own, but she's scared. Says they're planning something big, and they're worried about loose ends. Loose ends. The phrase echoed in my mind, conjuring images of Sarah and her husband, their mysterious disappearance suddenly taking on a more sinister cast. Was that what I was now? A loose end to be tidied away? The office window offered a view of the city skyline, where Morrison Financial's building rose like a monument to corruption. Somewhere in those gleaming offices, Tom was probably preparing for tonight's dinner, anticipating another successful hunt. The thought made me physically ill. We need to move faster, I said, pulling out my own collection of evidence, recordings, documents, photographs. But first, I need to get Michael somewhere safe. And there's something else. I hesitated, the weight of what I was about to suggest pressing against my conscience. Morgan leaned forward, understanding dawning in his eyes. You want to turn it back on them. The Sullivans' dinner tonight, it's not just a business meeting. It's an opportunity. If Tom's going to be distracted, focused on his next victim. The words felt like ashes in my mouth, but the path ahead was clearing. I need access to his office. The real one, at Morrison Financial. That's suicide, Morgan protested, but I could see him considering the possibilities. Their security dash is focused on keeping people out, I interrupted. Not on watching the wife of a trusted executive. I still have the access card Tom gave me for emergencies. And tonight, every major player will be at that dinner, watching him work his magic on their next target. The plan was forming, dangerous and desperate but somehow right. Like lancing a wound, the pain would be necessary for healing. My hands didn't shake as I gathered the evidence back into my bag, and my voice remained steady as I outlined what I would need. As I stood to leave, Morgan caught my arm. "Paulina," he said gravely, "if they catch you dash." "They won't," I replied, a cold certainty settling over me like armor. "Because they're looking for the woman they think they know, the trusting wife, the quiet supporter, the perfect accessory to their perfect crime. But that woman died the moment I opened that drawer in Tom's office. They don't know who they're dealing with now." The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city as I left Morgan's office, each step taking me closer to a point of no return. In my pocket, my phone buzzed again, Tom, confirming dinner plans, playing his part in a performance that was rapidly approaching its final act. Tonight, I would play mine one last time. I would smile, and laugh, and watch my husband select his prey. But beneath the performance, beneath the mask of the devoted wife, something else was taking shape, something forged in betrayal and tempered by rage, something that would bring their entire world crashing down. Revenge, I discovered, tastes like copper and ash, metallic with determination, bitter with the remnants of what was lost. As I stood in our bedroom, carefully selecting the outfit for tonight's performance at the Sullivans', each piece felt like armor being assembled for battle. The elegant black dress, the pearl necklace Tom had given me for our second anniversary, the wedding ring that now sat like a brand upon my finger, every element chosen to project the image of devoted wife while concealing the warrior beneath. The sun was setting over our neighborhood, painting everything in shades of blood and gold. Through the window, I could see Mrs. Henderson's house, dark and silent. She'd left town suddenly this morning, Morgan's doing, ensuring her safety before what was to come. Her empty windows stared back at me like vacant eyes, reflecting the dying light. My hands moved through the familiar motions of applying makeup, each stroke of mascara, each sweep of lipstick another layer of camouflage. In the mirror, I watched a stranger emerge, a woman who looked exactly like the one Tom had married, but whose eyes now held secrets deep enough to drown in. "You look stunning," Tom's voice came from the doorway, hitting me like a physical blow. I forced my fingers to remain steady on the lipstick tube, fighting the urge to flinch away from his reflection in the mirror. He approached with the fluid grace of a predator, his hands coming to rest on my shoulders with practiced tenderness. "The Sullivans are important clients," he continued, his breath warm against my ear. "Marcus specifically requested you be there tonight. Says his wife is looking forward to getting to know you better." The threat lay beneath his words like a knife wrapped in silk, so subtle I might have missed it weeks ago. I turned to face him, letting my lips curve into the smile he expected. "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, the lies flowing easily now. "After all, what kind of wife would I be if I didn't support your business ventures?" The irony of the question hung between us, unacknowledged. In his eyes, I caught a flicker of something, satisfaction perhaps, or pride in how well he'd trained me. The urge to slap him rose like bile in my throat, but I swallowed it down, adding it to the reservoir of rage I'd been building. My phone buzzed, a text from Michael confirming he'd reached the safe location Morgan had arranged. One piece secured. In my clutch lay an identical phone, loaded with everything I'd need for tonight's infiltration. The weight of it felt like salvation and damnation combined. "Shall we?" Tom extended his arm, every inch the devoted husband. As I took it, I remembered our wedding day, how his hand had felt like an anchor, keeping me steady. Now it was a shackle I was about to break, and the thought sent a thrill of dark pleasure through me. The drive to the Sullivans was a masterclass in performance art. I laughed at Tom's jokes, asked appropriate questions about the business, played my part with an Oscar-worthy dedication. All the while, my mind ran through Morgan's instructions, mapping out the sequence of events that would unfold once dinner began. Remember, Tom said as we pulled up to the Sullivans' mansion, Marcus can be a bit intense, but he's brilliant with investments. The opportunity he's presenting tonight could change everything for us. The layered meaning in his words made my skin crawl. I touched his cheek, letting my fingers trace the line of his jaw, memorizing the face of the man I was about to destroy. "I trust you," I whispered, serving him the exact lie he needed to hear, watching him swallow it whole. The Sullivans' front door opened, spilling warm light onto the driveway. Marcus stood there, backlit like a demon in an expensive suit, his wife Catherine a pale shadow beside him. As we walked toward them, I felt the weight of everything I carried, the evidence in my clutch, the rage in my heart, the plans ticking forward with each step. Tonight would be a symphony of calculated risks, each movement precisely timed. While Tom and Marcus selected their next victim over perfectly cooked steaks and $100 wines, I would be setting in motion the destruction of everything they'd built. The thought should have terrified me, but instead, it filled me with an almost serene clarity. I was no longer just playing a part, I was becoming something new, something forged in the crucible of betrayal and tempered by the need for justice. The woman walking into the Sullivans' house might have looked like Tom's wife, but beneath the surface, a revolution was brewing. Marcus greeted me with a kiss on the cheek that lingered a moment too long. "Paulina," he said, my name like smoke in his mouth. "So glad you could join us tonight. We have so much to discuss." I smiled, letting him see exactly what he expected, the compliant wife, the decorative accessory, the perfect pawn in their game. Let them think me harmless. Let them believe in their own invulnerability. Their arrogance would be their undoing, and I would be the architect of their downfall. The door closed behind us with the finality of a prison gate, and the evening's performance began. But this time, I wasn't the only one playing a part they didn't realize was scripted. Every smile, every gesture, every word was another step toward the precipice I'd created, and soon, very soon, they would all fall. In the end, empires fall not with a thunderous crash, but with the quiet click of a thumb drive being removed from a computer. Standing in Tom's darkened office at Morrison Financial, watching years of carefully constructed fraud copy across to my device, I felt the weight of every lie, every betrayal, every calculated manipulation crystallize into a single moment of perfect clarity. The dinner at the Sullivans had been a masterpiece of misdirection. While Tom and Marcus circled their latest prey, a widowed business owner whose company they'd already marked for destruction, I'd excused myself with a practiced smile and steady hands. The night guard had barely glanced at my access card, my presence so familiar it had become invisible. Just the way Tom had always wanted me, present but unseen, supportive but silent. Now, surrounded by the evidence of their corruption, I understood the true scope of what they'd built. Each folder revealed another layer of devastation, families destroyed, lives shattered, dreams turned to dust. All of it orchestrated with the same precision Tom had used to court me, to win my trust, to shape me into the perfect accomplice to his crimes. The screen cast a ghostly glow across my faces as I worked, my fingers moving with deliberate purpose. In my ear, Morgan's voice crackled through a hidden earpiece. "Police units are in position." Sullivan's assistant delivered the final pieces we needed. "It's time." Time, such a deceptive concept. 3 years of marriage condensed into a few gigabytes of data. A lifetime of trust dismantled in the space between heartbeats. The future I'd planned with Tom evaporating like morning mist, revealing the barren landscape beneath. Footsteps in the corridor sent ice through my veins, but I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The download bar crept forward with excruciating slowness as the footsteps grew closer. In my mind, I could see Tom at the dinner table, probably noticing my extended absence, perhaps feeling the first tremors of suspicion. The files finished copying just as the door handle began to turn. I slipped into the adjoining conference room, my heart thundering against my ribs with such force I feared it would give me away. Through the gap in the door, I watched Marcus Sullivan enter Tom's office, his movements sharp with agitation. His phone call carried clearly through the stillness, she's been asking questions, Tom. Your wife, she's been seen with Morgan. The situation needs to be handled. Tonight. The words should have terrified me. Instead, they filled me with an almost euphoric sense of vindication. Let them plot. Let them scheme. The evidence was already flowing through encrypted channels to prosecutors, journalists, and federal investigators. The avalanche had begun, and nothing could stop it now. I made my way to the elevator, each step measured and calm despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. In the polished doors, my reflection looked both foreign and familiar, a woman transformed by the very betrayal meant to break her. The lobby was empty save for the night guard, who nodded as I passed. Outside, the city pulsed with its normal rhythms, unaware that within its gleaming towers, a reckoning was unfolding. My phone buzzed, Morgan confirming receipt of the files. The next few hours would see simultaneous raids across 3 states, the careful dismantling of an empire built on broken lives. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to the safe house where Michael waited, watching the city lights recede in my rearview mirror. Behind me, sirens began to wail, a chorus of justice long delayed but finally unleashed. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, my mind clear despite the magnitude of what I'd set in motion. The news would break by morning. Morrison Financial's carefully constructed facade would crumble, taking Tom and Marcus and all their conspirators down in a spectacular fall from grace. The evidence was irrefutable, their victims too numerous to ignore, their crimes too egregious to conceal. Hours later, as dawn began to paint the sky in shades of redemption, my burner phone lit up with a final message from Morgan: "It's done. They're in custody. You're safe now." Safe, such a simple word for such a complex reality. I stepped out onto the safe house's balcony, letting the morning air wash over me. In the distance, helicopters circled the Morrison Financial building like birds of prey, their searchlights cutting through the last remnants of darkness. The woman who had entered that house 3 weeks ago, who had discovered her husband's true nature through a locked drawer and whispered warnings, was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone forged in the fire of betrayal and tempered by the pursuit of justice. My reflection in the window showed no traces of the tears I'd shed, no evidence of the fear I'd overcome. Instead, I saw what Tom had failed to see, not an accessory to his ambitions, but a force of nature capable of bringing his entire world crashing down. The sun rose fully, warming my face with the promise of a new day. I thought of Sarah, of all the others who had fallen victim to Tom's carefully orchestrated destruction. Their ghosts could rest easier now, their losses acknowledged, their truths finally brought to light. My wedding ring, that circle of gold that had once represented endless love but had become a symbol of captivity, lay heavy in my pocket. As the morning light caught its surface, I realized that some circles are meant to be broken, some promises deserve to be betrayed, and sometimes the greatest act of loyalty is to destroy the very thing you once swore to protect. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, testimonies to give, statements to make, a new life to build from the ashes of the old. But for now, in this moment between what was and what would be, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I'd accomplished. Not just survival, but revolution. Not just escape, but transformation. The truth had indeed set me free, but not in the way the poets meant. It had freed me to become something entirely new, something forged in betrayal's fire and tempered by justice's cool resolve. The sun continued to rise, and with it, the first chapter of my new story began to unfold.